So comprehensive sex education will teach proper human sexual health, which will lead to decreasing teen pregnancy. This was a point made by a fellow peer. They made the assumption that by teaching comprehensive sex education and K-12 education will encourage students to make smarter choices based off their secondary claims that teen pregnancy rates had risen in correlation to abstinence-only teaching, and that sexual intercourse between students had slowed down in correlation with sex ed. These were the only two claims made by this presenter for such a big concept. I believe that in order for this to be believable and taken into consideration, there has to be more research. So abstinence-only teaching. My opponent states that in 2005, researchers found that teen pregnancy had risen to 58.8% throughout 48 states in teens ages 14 to 19 years old. Alongside that, they also state that teenagers in the abstinence-only programs were found less likely to use contraception. I have done research on this way of teaching, and according to Kate Beret of ABC News, she states that students receiving abstinence-only teaching are 50% more likely to become pregnant than those receiving comprehensive sex ed. There's not much to argue with here, as many sources, including my opponents, prove that abstinence-only teaching may not be as effective as provided comprehensive sex ed. Next, comprehensive sex education. My opponent states that comprehensive sex ed teaches proper education on human sexuality for students to make the right decisions during sexual activity. As well as 40% of comprehensive sex education programs found that students have slowed down sexual initiation, sexual partners decreased, and contraception has been enhanced. With that said, Kate Beret of ABC also touches down on this, stating that students receiving sex ed were 60% less likely to become pregnant than those who didn't receive it at all. One cannot deny the fact that comprehensive sex ed indeed has encouraged teens to not have sex. Lastly, although abstinence-only teaching may seem like it has a negative effect, some may voice the fact that the abstinence-only route may need to be adopted into some teachings to reverse the STD epidemic and take a much more serious approach. As abstinence and no sexual contact is the only way to steer clear of sexually transmitted diseases. Overall, whether comprehensive sex ed or abstinence only, it is up to the student or teen whose job it is to retain the information and recognize good from bad, to take each and every factor of sexual initiation into account and be wise in their actions.
Well, this doesn't sound much like a response. It sounds like a summary of what the advocate's argument was. There might be an argument here that says that there's no dispute on some of this information, so there's no controversy and there isn't really an argument there. Or, as you kind of suggest, maybe the argument is about whether or not students are capable of applying this information or making those sorts of decisions. I don't really know exactly what's going on here when it comes to a refutation, because it sounds like you, on the first point, you basically say, yeah, abstinence only doesn't work. The advocate's right on that. It doesn't work nearly as well as comprehensive sex education. And on the second point, yep, comprehensive sex education does produce a particular benefit, so the advocate's right on that. Just as a, kind of an analogy, a metaphorical sort of thing, if you were the defense attorney and you said, well, on the prosecution's first argument, they said that my client's fingerprints were on the gun. Yeah, they were on the gun. And on the second part, where they said my client had a motive to commit the crime, well, yeah, my client had a motive to commit the crime, but maybe criminals we need to look at their motives and see if they're thinking very hard. I'm going, well, you haven't really responded to the argument. You've kind of just described what the argument was that the other side made without disputing anything on it. So if there's no dispute, make an argument that there's no argument. But if there's, what you've kind of done is just recap what their argument was, accept those conclusions, and suggest, well, teens need to make a decision about how they're going to act and behave there. I'm not sure that there's I'm basically getting an echo of the advocate's argument here, so there's not a lot of conflict that's going on here. One of the things that I don't see here, for instance, is a discussion of trends on sexuality. I mean, the reference that we get is from 2005, the one study that was being done on this. That's 13 years ago. That's a long time ago. What's been going on with teen pregnancy in the last 13 years? Is there any correlation with the expansion of comprehensive sex education, or what have been the trends when it comes to STDs over the last 13 years as well? It seems like there would be some sort of information there. And then the question becomes, are those things affected by the kind of sex education that kids get, or are they affected by other things? I would suspect that there are lots of things that influence the behavior of teenagers when they are addressing potential sexual issues, and some of them are cultural in nature, changes and opportunities, and that might, and there have been big changes since 2005. I mean, the whole social media thing that we've talked about is vastly different than it once was. People are sexting nowadays, and they weren't sexting in 2005. Apps like Tinder and Grindr didn't exist. I don't know. Do they have a teen Tinder or Grindr? That sounds like it's a criminal enterprise if they do, by the way. That sounds like holy criminy. Let's arrest all those people. But maybe there is something that's comparable, a place where people do end up hooking up. Or, for instance, maybe it goes the other direction. I don't know. I just think that we need to have a little bit larger context on the argument than we get here, and there's not as much clash as there needs to be. All right, thank you.